there, I'm Nicole with Piatto Recipes. Today I'll be showing you how to make a focaccia at home. This soft and delicious foolproof recipe can be topped many different ways, but today I'll be topping it with fresh rosemary, which is growing like a weed outside my home in Italy. Let's get started, or as they say in Italian, cominciamo. To make focaccia, we just need a few simple ingredients.
Water, milk, fast rise yeast or beer yeast, sugar, salt, flour, olive oil, and whatever you want to top the focaccia with. Here I'm using fresh rosemary,
We start by adding 3 cups of flour to the stand mixer bowl.
which is 470 grams or 1 pound of flour.
I highly recommend that you weigh if possible, because it's always more accurate when baking. You can use either all-purpose flour, or better yet, bread flour. It's important that the flour you use have some gluten in it. This is the brand I'm using, which is famous in pizzerias throughout Italy, and you can actually find it on Amazon. I'll share the link in the video description, along with links to any other equipment that we're using that can be found on Amazon. To the flour, we add 1.5 teaspoons of yeast. That's 7 grams. And 1 tablespoon, or about 16 grams of sugar. And give it all a quick mix. Today I'll be using my stand mixer to do the job of mixing and kneading. Here I've got a KitchenAid Heavy Duty, which is very similar to the KitchenAid Pro series sold in the US. We start off mixing with the paddle attachment. For the liquids, we start with a little less than a cup of water, which is about 230 grams. Into the water, we add a half a cup of milk, or about 115 grams. If you have time for a long levitation, you can add this liquid as is. However, I'm going to pop this liquid in the microwave to bring it to lukewarm temperature. I pop this liquid into the microwave for about 10 seconds to bring it to room temperature, just to give our yeast a little bit of a push. And now our stand mixer is fitted with the paddle attachment. I'm going to turn it on low speed and slowly add the liquid. When that liquid is added, we measure out the olive oil. 1/4 cup or 45 grams. We turn the mixer back on and slowly drizzle in the olive oil. After you see the dough's begun gathering around the paddle attachment, it's time to replace it with the dough hook. And it's time to add the salt. If salt comes in contact with yeast directly, it can inhibit the function of the yeast, and the yeast won't work right and your bread or focaccia won't grow. And so a foolproof method is to add the salt a little bit later on, as we're doing here. So I'm just going to sprinkle in the salt. In this case we have 2.25 teaspoons, or about 12 grams. And I see that our dough looks a little bit wet, so after I start the kneading process, I may have to add 1 to 2 tablespoons of flour just to get the right dough consistency. Our dough's looking pretty good. I do see that the dough hook is struggling a little to grab the dough because it's a touch too wet. Okay, so here I'm going to add just a tablespoon of flour to give the dough hook a little bit more to grab onto. I think this is looking pretty good. You see how the dough is already grabbing the dough hook a little bit better and pulling some of that dough off the side of the bowl. So at this point, we just need to set the timer for 15 minutes and let the stand mixer do its job, kneading at a setting of 2. Now, as the dough kneads, you may see that because this is a soft dough, the dough does start to spread out in the bottom of the pan again. And that's okay, as long as you still see that there's dough wrapping around the dough hook. It's still a good consistency, so I'm not going to add any more flour at this stage. This dough's looking good, but here we're using a really large bowl designed for bulk ingredients, and here we're only making 1 portion of focaccia. So those of you with large bowls may notice that there's a tendency for small quantities of dough to stick to the side of the pan a little bit more. So in this case, I'm just gonna push down the dough from the sides before finishing my knead in order to be sure that the dough hook has a chance to grab and knead all the dough in the bowl. You probably won't need to do this if you're using a KitchenAid or another stand mixer with a smaller bowl that's designed for smaller amount of ingredients. Here we go. Our dough is ready for transfer. I'm going to transfer this dough to a well-oiled large Pyrex bowl. You could also leave it in the stand mixer, but I know when my dough is doubled in size when it reaches the top of this particular bowl. So I really like the Pyrex bowls for proofing. Your dough will still be wet and a little bit sticky, and that's just the way we want it. Now I'm going to oil my hands just a little bit more in order to form a nice ball with our dough to support a nice and even rise. So I'm going to pull up a piece, fold it in the middle, turn my bowl a quarter, do the same thing. One more time. And finally, we have a nice dough ball. I'm going to flip it over and cover it with plastic wrap. And now we need to let our dough proof until it's doubled in size, about 1 to 2 hours. The time can vary drastically depending on the temperature of the environment of the room that the dough is proofing in, or even the temperature outside. And here I'm proofing in the middle of winter, so I'm going to show you a few tips for proofing in your oven.
If your oven can go as low as 89 Fahrenheit, 32 Celsius, set the oven to static at that temperature for proofing. Otherwise, simply turn on the oven light for proofing.
And now we'll transfer our beautiful dough to another pan for a short second rise. You can use a jelly roll pan, a cookie sheet, even a lasagna pan. It doesn't matter. This particular pan I'm using is a 40 by 30 centimeter or around 15 by 13 inches, 15 by 12 inches pan. I'm not going to be using parchment paper today, but if you don't have a non-stick pan, I highly recommend that you put a piece of parchment paper down at the bottom just to prevent sticking. This pan, however, is perfect for baking focaccia, and it is considered a professional pan. It's a blue iron pan, and it's well known to conduct heat poorly, and that means that whatever is cooked in it will become crispy and golden and have a very even cook. And that's exactly what we want for pizzas and focaccias. So the first thing we want to do is add a little extra oil to the bottom of the pan. And I'm just going to use my fingers to coat it evenly. Okay, and now it's time to transfer our dough. Beautiful. I'm going to slightly oil our hands and spread the dough out like this. Stretching the dough from one end of the pan to the other. This dough does have quite a bit of gluten, so if you notice the dough springing back, just press gently, let it relax, and continue pressing. We can also lightly use our fingertips. Make sure that you don't leave too much dough in the center, but rather spread it out evenly across the pan. Another thin layer of extra virgin olive oil. A little bit more around the borders. And now we're going to create that classic Italian focaccia shape with our fingertips. So use your fingertips to press in and out, and you can go pretty deep, making fingerprint marks throughout the entire dough, like this. Now we're going to cover the dough with plastic wrap and let the dough rise for another hour. And then it's into the oven. Here I'm using rosemary because it's one of the traditional toppings for focaccia in Italy. And I'm not kidding when I say rosemary grows like a weed. The hedges outside of my house are practically as tall as I am. If I could sell all the fresh rosemary that I have outside at American prices, I could retire immediately.
And now I'm just going to mince this lovely rosemary. And while we're waiting for the final focaccia proof,
we'd love to hear from you. So feel free to leave us a comment and let us know what other recipes you'd like to see on our channel. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. It's totally free. And click the bell for video notifications. And how beautiful is this? Tiny bit of olive oil. We're going to delicately spread it. We don't want to burst any of our beautiful bubbles.
this olive oil will give us a nice golden crispy crust.
Couple pinches of fine salt.
And if you like, a bit of coarse or flake salt. Here I'm using Malden flakes. This will really bring out the flavor of the focaccia. And of course the star of our show, 1 to 2 tablespoons of minced rosemary.
And now I'm going to put this beautiful focaccia into a preheated 350 degree Fahrenheit, 175 degrees Celsius oven for 20 to 35 minutes. In this case, because I'm using a larger pan and I have a shorter focaccia, we're probably gonna set the timer for about 25 minutes and see how it's coming along. It's time and I'm really hungry, so let's go check out our focaccia. Che bello! As they say in Italian, mamma mia! And in Italy, you can never have too much olive oil. It smells absolutely amazing. Okay, we're gonna cut this bad boy like an Italian grandma with scissors. soft, fluffy, croccante on the outside, perfectly cooked on the bottom. This is fantastic as a snack, for sandwich bread, but what if even this isn't tall enough for you? All you have to do is spread out the dough in a slightly smaller pan. The end result will be a even taller focaccia, and you just need to add a few minutes of cook time onto the oven time. E buon appetito, piatto pulito!